Okay. Pause recording. And we can start whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Jacob. So normally we do a roll call, but I thought we would just sort of combine roll call with your oral communication and member updates. So all of you just say your name and organization and any updates that you want to provide to the group. And I think all of you, actually, maybe not all of you were here when I said good morning. So hope you're all well. Alma Flores, Chair, Reach, CDC, my day job. And I can give my updates. I don't think I gave my updates last time. The Marianne is well underway. We're almost, lease up is on its final legs and we're heading toward conversion of permanent financing. So exciting. Why don't we go around with Sheila?
Good morning. Sheila Fink, Community Housing Fund. And I will just say I was not happy to read the story that Portland led the nation in rent increases, 39% in the past year. So we know that this work is so important, but and I know Jacob told us to be happy and look at the accomplishments of the past year, but also, the challenges are really daunting, aren't they? So.
Sid.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sid Scott, principal with Scott Edwards Architecture. Delighted to be here this morning. The, update from my standpoint would be that we still see strong interest from clients in the pursuit of affordable housing. Thank you, Alma, and others. So, we think that there's still a good run out there of affordable housing projects coming and funding for those.
Dave.
Morning, everybody. I woke up this morning not only to snow, but remembering when we all used to be in the same room together more than a couple of years ago. So I look forward to that day again. Not that I'm completely zoomed out, but I'm pretty close to being zoomed out. But we're really busy, metro bond projects and otherwise, all kind of working towards completion in the county. Very busy with pre-leasing activities for the Belfry and Forest Grove, plus the Affordable Housing Preservation 4 portfolio for the county that we're knee deep into preparing for actual resident relocation services and preservation of that portfolio, which is really exciting. But yeah, lots to do and excited.
Thank you. Eric?
Good morning, everyone. Eric Schmidt, curmudgeon at large. Very appreciative to be here and for all the work that you do and hoping for better days ahead.
Catherine.
Morning, everybody. Catherine Gallion, Director of Housing Stability at Community Action. As far as updates go, we are fully done with ERA 1 as of this week, which is kind of right on target, and starting to dip into ERA 2. That's the emergency rent assistance from Treasury. So lots of funding out into the community, and still more to come. The demand remains quite high, probably due in no small part to Sheila's news. Rents are going up and people are still struggling to recover.
Yeah.
Also launched, no, it's okay. Also launched the Lywa program. So we're providing water utility assistance in addition to gas and electric. Those funds are limited and going quite quickly, actually. So expect those to only last about 6 months total, and hoping that there's more water utility assistance behind that. There is a water assistance program also running through clean water, through Washington County, through Clean Water Services onto local utility bills. That is a really very cool and elegant way of making sure people get support. So I would encourage you to look into that. That's their news, not mine to share, but it's an update. cool project. So that's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Renee?
Hi, Renee Browse, CEO of the Sherwood Chamber of Commerce. I really don't have any updates this morning, but except that we're expecting some funds to come where we can help provide some relief for businesses and area residents.
Thanks, Renee. Vince?
No updates other than this is my either last or next to last meeting. I'm off the committee as of March. I'm spending a lot of time with my grandkids in California, so I'm out of town 4 or 5 months a year. So when it goes back to in person, it didn't make sense. But I want to make a comment about Washington County. I've been involved in affordable housing in Washington County for 30 years. And Sheila and the other long-term advocates know this. There was a time when there was nothing happening in this county because the political environment didn't want it. I just want to thank all of you who have battled this battle all these years to get to the point where it's actually become a relatively easy place to do affordable housing. It used to be close to impossible. 20 years ago, the commission, a couple of commissioners came down and yelled at the director of Oregon Housing, who was my boss, about how come they hadn't got any projects funded the last 2 years. So he called me to the office and he had them ask me that question. I said, it's very easy. You haven't asked for any money. It was real hard to give money away to people who don't apply for it. So we've gone from not applying to what you're doing now, and congratulations to all of you. One other comment based on what Sheila said, and Sheila's heard me with this complaint for a long time. Rents are going up dramatically. The competitive funds for very low income people are still hard to get, even though there's more money than we've ever had. I believe and have believed for a long time, it's time for the nonprofits to step up and build some 60% units using bonds and 4% and help the working people have housing too. Doesn't do anything to negate what we do for the low income, but the bonds 4% are non-competitive funds. And I just think there's a world of help we can do by using that source for higher income, low income people. Thanks.
Thank you, Vince, for your service. I put a little message in the chat. I hope some of you will do so as well. I do want to share some bad news with you though, Vince. 4% are now competitive as of 2 months ago.
Oh, sorry about that. I did not know that.
We met our public activity bond limit.
Okay.
So that's sad news because
that's bad news, but that's a temporary thing. That's not always going to be the case.
We don't know that yet.
No, but I mean, years ago, 20 years ago, it was tough to do 4% because of that. So then there's periods where we never got close to the cap. But I'm sorry to hear that, but keep your eyes open because that's not going to be a permanent situation.
Yeah, I hope
Thanks.
not. Thank you, Vince. Melinda.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Melinda Bell with Union Gospel Mission Women's Life Change Program. The only update I have is that we're going to be breaking ground for the new center in June. So it's finally happening. Thank you.
Can we be invited to your ribbon cutting or virtual ribbon cutting or?
Absolutely.
Great. Balen.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I don't have that much update. It just I'm super busy with finding the affordable house or apartment for our client, our immigrant. I have something I want to share with you. Like yesterday, I was checking the affordable house listed at Washington County's website, and I called most of them, and none of them answered. I left a voicemail for them. The only one answered me, I think it was Aloha Park. Aloha Park answered me, and she said that they're gonna go under construction for 16 months, and they cannot receive any application. Another concern that the price of the rent, as I shared before, the price of the rent in Beaverton, it is skyrocketing. Like the apartment I'm living, I'm paying like 1,000. But if someone replace me and take the same apartment, they have to pay 1550, something like that. So with that, the challenge becomes very difficult for us to find a housing. So please, within your network, if you know anyone with like landlord and any affordable house owner, if they wanna waive some of the requirement and help these people, I can share my business email in the chat box and connected with me. Thank you. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Manan. So on to the approval of the minutes. I don't see that anyone else joined. So we should move to the minutes. Has everyone read those, and any comments to make about edits?
I move to
Hearing-
approve, Madam Chair.
Great,
I'll
thank you,
second.
Eric. Thank you, Sheila. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Oops. Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes pass. On to the executive director's report. You'll notice an essential member of our team is not present. Comey could not join, as you heard maybe at the beginning or not. So Josh is doing us the pleasure of providing the executive director's report.
Well, good morning, Chair and Committee. It's good to be with you. I'm going on 3 years here as the Assistant Director, and this is the first time that I think I've stepped in for Comey, which tells us Comey needs to take more time off. So we'll push him in that direction, right? So just a couple quick updates. Right now with COVID-19, we're still in a high-risk category. Our staff are still teleworking quite a bit, but there's still the mask mandate in place. As everyone's aware, we anticipate that will probably go away by the end of next month at some point. But for the time being, we're still promoting telework. Everyone's still masking up. And so far, we've been pretty healthy, pretty lucky with health in our department. I will just highlight that last month we gave our quarterly report on the Metro Bond program and the SHS program to the Board of Commissioners. The links to those are in the report this month. Went really well. I think the board was really appreciative. It went over really well. A lot of hard work, comes to fruition, and these quarterly updates are a good way for us to keep the board and the community engaged. Every single year, the Housing Authority has to submit a Public Housing Authority plan, a PHA plan. So we're in that period now, and that's where we let them know if there's any substantial changes. And this year, it's kind of a continuation of everything that we've been doing, which is like Section 18, which has been going on for a couple of years. The big change this year, and you'll get a report this afternoon or this morning on it, is that we're actually attaching our MTW supplement to the PHA plan. So it's a part of the PHA plan. So you'll get kind of a report out on the proposed MTW activities in just a little bit. We're excited that we've been working with our Office of Equity on a training plan for the department for 2022. It kind of all kick-started in January, where all of our managers and supervisors went through a harassment and discrimination training just for our department that was put on by the Office of Equity. Last week, all staff got the same training. And we also partnered with Latricia and her team on finding a consultant to come in and work with our department this year. So we've signed a contract with Cultural Coaching Solutions, who's going to be working with us on different equity trainings and coaching throughout the year for staff and for leadership. So we're really excited about that. And just to dovetail on, the professionalization and all the work that we're doing to support our staff, our managers and supervisors have been participating in a 6-month management and supervisor training program. And so it's a 90 minutes every single month. We're actually doing it in partnership with a cooperative library. Blue Tiger is the group who we've been working with, and they do a lot of work with Washington County, Multnomah County, and the state. So they've been really great, but we strongly believe in investing in our team. And, that's an important part of this work, is building up our capabilities and capacities. Comey wanted me to mention Adams Crossing. It's like the ongoing move that's going forever. So depending on supply chain issues, we're hoping that we'll be able to move in by May. But we're kind of at the whims of kind of supply chain issues and staffing issues and things like that. So HP4, that's the portfolio rehab. I think Balin mentioned, he called the Lowell Park. It's a major rehab project. So 5 of our 10 properties are going to be syndicated into the tax credit program. We're inching our way towards closing here. It's, as all of you know, it's complicated and there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So phase approach is being used around the relocations. Some initial notices have gone out. Cascade is managing the relocation, but they brought in, I think, a really great consultant, Darcy. I can't remember her last name, but I think she's been doing a lot of relocation work around the metro area for quite some time. So we're targeting a closing day of mid-April. That could move, into May to start the construction phase up at Bonita, which just needs a lot of work. That's going to be the kind of first phase on that. And then just last but not least, we're going to be talking about, but we're really excited about the implementation of our moving to work plan. We're finalizing our policies for our rent reform study, which is a HUD mandated part of our MTW process. So it's one of those things we agreed to contractually. And then we're also looking at several other activities, which we're going to talk about today. So unless there's any questions, I'll just end the director's report there. Thank you.
I have one question, maybe comment. The bond program, 812 units in Washington County, has been unbelievably successful. Every month, there's at least 5 or 6 letters to the editor in the Oregonian, show me the units. I don't see where this money is going. Do the counties or Metro do a good job of getting that out there? Or I'm always shocked when I see those letters because we have done a good job. You guys have done a good job.
Yeah, well, Comey and I were meeting with Patricia Rojas, who's the director of the housing programs at Metro yesterday about that. And I think really what we're all looking at in the Tri-County region and specifically in Washington County is like an all-out media kind of story, not just about SHS, but telling the story about the Metro bonds, the other programs that we're doing, because we brought a lot of new resources to our county, like federal resources through emergency housing vouchers, through HUD VASH vouchers. So I think that we are really partnering. We have our public affairs folks meeting with Metros and Multnomah and Clackamas County's public affairs and comms people to really tell this story. Because you're right, at this point, the work is happening. The units are getting on the ground, projects are starting, and it's up to us to tell that story. So we are partnering really, really strategically with our Metro and regional partners on trying to get this information out.
Any other questions? So we don't have any resolutions or action items, but we did want to bring forth at the last meeting, Balen Yunus had brought forth some issues related to immigrant and refugee services and support. And we didn't have enough time at the end to really have a meaningful conversation around it. So I thought this would be a great time for us to have a broader discussion around what Balen brought up and what he's seeing, hearing. And then if you all have any solutions, if the county has any solutions, please feel free to voice them now. So that we can make sure that we're addressing that population need in the best way that we can. And if we don't, we only have about 15 minutes to have that discussion. I apologize for that. But if we need to spill this over into the next meeting, we shall do that. So let's start that. Balen, I don't know. I know you've mentioned it several times when you do your updates. And so I don't know if you need to offer more. I think we are all, unless people tell me they're not familiar with what Balen has raised a few times now. If you need a recap, raise your hand. Seeing none, why don't we just start into the solution mode? I think if folks know of resources, other ways of addressing the population need, let's start the conversation.
Can I just ask a question for Balen? As to whether there are ideas from other jurisdictions or other places that have implemented programs that you would want us to know about? Because I really don't know what, beyond the standard getting on waiting lists and finding out about programs that are opening. Are there some other creative ideas?
Thanks, Selma, for bringing that up. the subject is really important. And thank you, Sheila, for the question. I think the only way that we can help these people is to waive some of the requirements. Like last week, I was waiting in the line. There was like 10 people waiting to get the application for a house, 3-bedroom house. And then when I get it, I checked that the requirement, maybe I have it here, the requirement for the applicant to apply for the house. One of them that they have to have the social security number. Without social security number, they are clearly saying we cannot run your background. I know the criminal, blah, blah. So they don't have that. That means, so they cannot apply for that. That was for a family is out of state. And the father he has some sort of disability. And they don't have a strong income. They don't have a rental history. And whenever you apply, there's going to be a list. The property manager or the owner asks you to provide or answer the question. Yesterday, one of them, without providing me the link how to apply for the property, he asked me about the family situation, and he apologized. He said, "I'm sorry, they don't have nobody working. They don't have a proof of income, things, rental history. So I do apologize. We cannot. Maybe you're gonna help them at the beginning for the couple months, but after that, how they gonna handle to pay that amount of money?" That's a good question. I don't have answer for that, but they're gonna be eligible maybe for the rental assistance, some program they can join that, but still is really challenging. I was thinking this question for you, Liz. If any Section 8 or the voucher, do you think we can get any benefit from that program to be used for these people, even temporarily, like for 3 months, 4 months?
For the specific voucher, that program is waitlist only, and so people coming onto that program are required to enter that waitlist. But we do have the possibility, if going through the Community Connect, to see if they would be eligible for any of our current regional ones, like the ARLA, Regional Long-Term Rental Assistance Program. It's a mouthful. And that's through our SHS. Doing the Community Connect will also hopefully see what other opportunities are out there for current short-term and long-term, but they're still building a lot of those structures. We're still building those here within the county. So there might not be the quick answers up to right now. It's a need, but which isn't helpful for the current, but we are working on those for the future.
Thanks, Liz. So the name is Regional Rental Assistant. That's the name?
Yeah, I'll put in the chat. I'll put the
Okay.
link for you to connect for the intake link for that program.
Okay. If you have any question, I'm ready to answer. Other than that, I shared my email. If you know anyone interested and want to help, you can just link me. Yeah, the link with that person.
Balance. So I have a question about how many families are we talking about, and what duration of assistance will be needed?
So the program right now, when we are receiving these people, they are staying at hotel for 3 months, and they are getting 3 meals for free per day. But it's time for them, like when the 3 months, 90 days done, they have to move out. So we are helping, like finding the apartment for them. As of now, I have like 40 family.
40?
Yeah. It's family and individual. Let's say 40 cases I do have. So
okay.
Some of them 1 person or the family out of 6 or 7. Okay. So what I need like a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom.
Okay.
I assume our low barrier screening criteria.
Yes.
Obviously for the Metro bond work, doesn't apply to this population, Shannon? I'm kind of looking to you through my Zoom lens. Or does it? I just sent a message to our property manager asking that question. Hopefully he'll reply, but I'm wondering, Shannon, if you know the answer quickly.
So was your specific question like if the low barrier screening criteria would be accessible to this population? Is that your question? I mean, I think the identification is a challenge still because you still need to provide a social security number, I think, for the low income housing tax credit paperwork part of it. So that's kind of separate from the screening criteria. I think the screening criteria does allow for a lack of rental history, and so it would be more accessible, although, it is just, we just have the viewfinder. So one project currently that is leasing up now. So it could be a good option. But there still are those issues that we're hearing around people needing the necessary documentation and length of time to then get their actual social security card in hand.
Okay. I see Joshua, Dave, and then Catherine.
I'm wondering if Catherine's gonna bring up the same thing I am. I could have sworn I just messaged our legislative staff about what's happening at the state level. I could have sworn I heard some stuff was happening either at the legislative level or at OHCS around housing programs for Afghan refugees. So I will follow up on that, and then if there's anything there that is helpful, I will send that out.
Thank you.
Can you send it out to the whole group? Because I think it's really important not to just send it to one person as an advocate, but all of us can be advocates and promoters of this information. So please do that. Catherine. Or I can't remember who I said next.
Yeah, that's fine. So you're right, Josh. There was a package passed, and not in the last legislative session that was specific around housing for Afghan refugees. I don't remember the details either, but hopefully your government affairs staff will be able to get that back to you quickly. There are tools and mechanisms that work for getting folks past screening criteria, especially if there is a rent assistance program that can commit to paying for the portion of the rent that the household can afford for the duration of a lease, and promissory notes and things like that work well. And there are definitely some tips and tricks that housing navigators would be able to share with your teams. But in the cases of households that don't have the documentation, one of the missing pieces across the continuum for lots of households, but very clearly in these situations, is a kind of a master leasing kind of a program where the lease is in the name of the sponsoring organization and the household has access to the units, and that allows them to have the time to get their documentation in order, and then have the lease switch over to their name when they're ready for that, or if they choose to stay there. That would solve some of that initial problem that you were describing, Melon, of folks that don't have any of their documentation, don't have social security numbers. But as to my knowledge, there isn't currently a master leasing program operating in Washington County.
Thanks, Catherine, for sharing that. Actually, we do provide like a letter, it's called a general letter explaining the situation of these people. They have been like interviewed by government agency, and that's gonna be the next step. They're gonna get the documentation, find a job, they're getting support from a resettlement agency. And we do provide also promissory note or itemized promissory note. But some of the property manager asking for like the promissory note, we have to mention that we're gonna pay the rent for this client as long as they're in the property, and we cannot do that. We can say that we are providing the support for the resettlement period, like 6 months, that's it. But we cannot cover the rent for 1 year or as long as the tenant. Some of them, they do understand, and they are taking this document and working on it and accepting the application, but that's not always true. Yeah, sometimes they are just rejecting and apologizing. Thank you, Catherine.
Dave. You're on mute, Dave.
That was a perfectly delivered speech. I'll try it again. No, I was kidding. Yeah, I mean, we have two different thresholds, right? So we have a screening threshold, low, barrier criteria or otherwise, and then we also have a qualification threshold. So when I was speaking to our criteria, whether it's the low barrier criteria or not, none of our criteria would typically deny any household in this situation, or any refugee household. So that is not necessarily a barrier, right? The qualification barrier can sometimes be an issue. The only time Social Security numbers are required is if we're talking about HUD or USDA rural development programs or subsidy programs, right? But for a tax credit or bond project or the vast majority of affordable housing inventory out there, we don't need citizenship status, we don't need Social Security numbers, et cetera. They're oftentimes asked for, and almost everybody asks for them on an application because they're, for the purposes of making certain that we don't get mixed credit files or we get complete information through the screening process, but they're not required. And what I always recommend people do when they fill out applications is just enter zeros on the, Social Security line item saying they don't have them, and therefore they can't be requested. So from a screening or qualification perspective, as long as we can verify some form of income, it's not necessarily a barrier that can't be overcome. The bigger challenge is that the available units in the inventory in the Portland metro area, they're mostly at 60% of median income, right? So the rents are relatively high and requires us to work with agencies and other providers for a way to kind of help supplement that rent or provide some form of rent assistance. If somebody's out there and they're calling property location by property location, that's a tough go. I know we've talked about it amongst this group before, but we used to have a great tool called Housing Connections, which doesn't necessarily exist any longer. But when that was updated and that was, well utilized, that was a good resource because you could, easily call 20, 30 locations in the Portland metro area and get turned down very easily. When somebody calls, one of our, skilled leasing people or housing counselor, I mean, we're taking the person's information and then, fitting that information to possible, locations that are taking applications, don't have long waiting lists, or that more or less meet the criteria where we know somebody can be qualified. And in most cases, that's what really has to happen to get any traction, on this issue. I've recommended in the past that, it'd be great without a tool like Housing Connections or something like that. It would be great if there was a housing counselor out there that could take that information from, the majority of especially larger affordable housing landlords out there and have a, working tool of where to place people, because there's plenty of available units that are new under lease up or otherwise. It's just a matter of what those rent levels are and making certain that we can, get people to the property and then we can work with them and counsel them to the point where we can get them qualified.
Well, this is the start of a lot of good information. I see that Josh put some reference articles for us.
It just looks like 18 million was in December, kind of what we were just talking about was put in place for a funding package for refugee resettlement. And it looks like the press release came out of the Oregon Department of Human Services. So I think we should look into that a little bit and see what the how they're taking the 18 million and funneling it into, because it does say short-term, long-term housing assistance, case management, legal services. So we should probably look into that a little bit more because that's a dedicated resource pool for the issues we're discussing.
Great. I want to thank everyone. We'll have more of these. I think it's important for us with our collective minds. This is we all bring value to these conversations, and I think it's important for us to help one another advocate for certain things and move forward. Sorry, Balen, we don't have a whole lot of more time, but if you are interested in bringing this up again and learning more, or we can definitely put it on the agenda again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. We do have some new business. I've heard from a few of you that homeownership opportunities and support is of interest as well, and finding out, we want to make sure that we're meeting the full spectrum of housing needs. And so how does homeownership fit in the programming at Washington County? And there are a lot of new funding sources around ARPA under the Biden plan that will trickle down into communities and opportunities around homeownership. And so how are we lending our support to those requests in the region and specifically in Washington County? And so I don't know if anyone wants to kick this off. Those are my 2 cents. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I know homeownership is an important housing spectrum topic. Sheila.
Well, it's definitely been on my mind. At Community Housing Fund, we're interested in what can be done and who we can partner with, because we have worked with the Habitat chapters, but we haven't seen a lot of other opportunities to increase homeownership. So just thinking about what the Housing Authority and Department of Housing Services has done over the years. And I think I did mention this to Alma after the last meeting. You see it on that first page when you look at what are the goals of the Housing Authority DHS, and it's like one of them is homeownership. So it's just a reminder of the things that are going on. Is there anything we as an advisory committee want to promote or add to the conversation? And so, we definitely are pleased that the commissioners decided to set aside some of the Housing Production Opportunity Fund for homeownership. That's a first this year. The Section 18 disposition seems like a huge opportunity just because first-time home buyers really can't compete in this market at all. So that's at least 60 plus units that it seems like could contribute part of the solution. So that's squarely in the kind of control of this Housing Authority and DHS. So that's exciting, but would take a lot of little pieces to kind of make it really work. A lot of different agencies with IDAs and down payment assistance and counseling to get folks mortgage ready into those, to get access to those units. So we're excited about that opportunity. One of the other reasons it came to mind is there are groups like Habitat doing homeownership. They would like to access ARPA funds. Is that, and it's felt unclear to me with this body whether we ever make recommendations or support requests like that. So when the Habitat chapters let us know about their joint proposal, I just had that question, is that something that should come up at HAC? Should we, is there anything useful we can do other than saying, we believe homeownership should also be one of the housing, opportunities that exist in the county, but what's the role? How do we partner? And I know the strategic plan for the Housing Authority, which I know when I joined HAC, I got a copy of it, and sometimes I'll glance back at it. It's in my binder, and it talks about homeownership mostly as that the Housing Authority would partner with others. So I guess there's some opportunities, and the question is, what does that mean? What can we do to help promote those opportunities together?
Josh, do you want to answer or?
Yeah, well, I think that this committee absolutely has the opportunity to help, provide some of that guidance on strategic priorities. It is in our strategic plan that homeownership is an important part of our mission and continuum, right, of the housing that we provide. Sheila mentioned that we're partnering on our Section 18 disposition with those 60 homes, and I think there's a big great opportunity for affordable homeownership there. But we also have, it's not a oft-used strategy, but we also have a Section 8 home ownership program. And Liz, I think we only have a couple people who are utilizing it. Am I correct?
Correct. We have 5 people leased up now under that program. It's a 15-year program, and we did about, I can confirm the number exactly, but my team member who does the home ownership program did about 15 to 20 interest kind of discussions with the participants on our program last year alone.
Yeah. So I think there's different options to maybe, escalate and look for new and innovative ways to not only partner, but maybe lead some of this work. So I think it's definitely something we take back to Comey and maybe bring it back in a more structured way in the future, if that's the wishes of the committee.
Sid.
You had a question for Sheila, because I'm really interested in the habitat angle. Do you know how much housing they're doing? 'Cause we do some volunteer design work for them, but they're generally smaller, like duplexes, that kind of thing. I'm just curious if you have a sense of that.
Well, I mean, I think homeownership is super expensive to subsidize to a level for, modest income folks. So definitely the number of units that are happening in homeownership programs compared to rental, no comparison. But for the lucky recipient that gets into that house, can be very different experience, life-changing, et cetera. So I do have the numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. I mean, I think there's a huge sort of sea change. I mean, like Vince talked about what changed in Washington County in terms of capacity for multifamily when the political will was there. Huge things happen. And this feels like maybe one of those turning points for homeownership. So the Habitat chapters jointly, Willamette West, was around for a long time, and they are now part of the Portland regional Habitat. And I think we've seen an increase in capacity that's like, I don't know if you'd say monumental, but it's quite significant. So the number of projects they have going in Washington County right now is way more than we've ever seen in the past. I think 4 or 5 pretty big projects. So I think between them and West Quality Habitat, who's always been really creative and scrappy as a smaller, homeownership Habitat chapter, we have a lot of potential. And with the changes in zoning missing middle, it's kind of like a fair housing for homeownership, where outright, if you can't deny the capacity to build some smaller units, they're not cheap. So that may not be the end all, but for Habitat chapters, I think that's a big sea change, that the zoning will allow them to do what they do really well, build townhouses and other, and I think they are doing some large units. I think you meant small numbers, not small units, but they are doing some large units accessible. They, just the level of income folks they can get in is great. So there may be some ways to combine all these things. And I guess that's why, bringing it up, that between Section 18 and the habitats that do a lot of repairs as well as new homes, maybe on the Section 18 units, is there capacity to add density? Is there a way to get refugees into those? I guess just having us think about the ways we can work together to really hit the folks who are, I know there's too many folks struggling right now. We can't do it all, but certainly by combining efforts, we can reach deeper.
Yeah, no, Sheila, you bring up a great point around the upzoning and the middle housing work that's been happening throughout the state, and the fact that we no longer require single family housing zoning in the state as a whole. Unincorporated Washington County has a lot of single family houses on 10,000 square foot lots that could accommodate 5 to 8 potentially, depending on the zoning. But what are we doing there, and what is maybe what the county's land use folks are doing, and perhaps we can have them come and give a presentation about how they're sort of revamping the zoning code to accommodate more density at the single family level, with either cottage clusters, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and what have you. Does anyone know at the county if that's happening in the land use section?
Go ahead, Sheila.
They did a presentation for our board and have done a paper on what it would take to make those units affordable, which is probably new resources.
Yeah.
Maybe construction excise tax. So, those are the kinds of things, though, that if we want to see movement, maybe we support those. I don't know.
Right.
I had one other thing, Alma, if I could just bring it up real briefly. And I brought this idea up, I guess it seems like years ago now, but the idea of adding like ADUs to housing authority property. I remember seeing the inventory, and to me, it looked like there would be a way to significantly add housing And ADUs are less expensive to build and, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that ties to really home ownership, but it does, you know, add to the housing inventory. So I don't know if that's something we could loop back around and take a look at again.
Excellent point. So we only had until 9:50 for this discussion. So Jacob, if you don't mind, can you put for ongoing business, land use and ADU conversation of HAC property? Unless someone else has another idea to add to that, to sort of just follow back up on.
I don't have another idea, but I do have a question maybe for Sheila. Sheila, do you know what the average AMI is for people doing habitat housing?
It's been as low as 30% with West
Yeah.
Quality. I mean, I think 60 is, you know, 60 and below, they're reaching really low, and they provide
okay.
ongoing support.
Okay, thank you.
So if there were ARPA applications going through in this current round and future rounds, Joshua, what's the operating procedure for letters of support, or, you know, given that it's already part of the HAC's mission, if an organization were interested in doing such, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, let me check in with Comey on that. I know that we have an ARPA committee for the county. And I believe board members and some directors of different departments, including Comey, have been on that ARPA committee, and where the resources have been allocated for ARPA 1 or both phases of funding that we've had. So I could check in with him and just see if there's been any like standard operating procedure on how other committees or groups have made like recommendations or advocacy efforts for ARPA funds. So I can check in with him.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have department updates, unless there are other questions. Last minute. Okay. Housing development. Shannon.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all, and I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to, so I'm going to briefly provide some highlights from the 2021 progress report for the Affordable Housing Bond Program. So that report was included as an attachment to your packet. And then I wanted to focus the presentation time I have today to share information about the specific process for lease up for the viewfinder. And so I've invited Katie Warden, who has been our AmeriCorps member for the past 2 years. And so she'll give about a 5-minute presentation that really dives into the details of that process. But first, just to give a couple of highlights of the Affordable Housing Bond 2021 progress report. I know in October at the HAC forum, I was able to give a presentation highlighting the 10 Metro Bond projects in our portfolio in the county's implementation area, and then was joined by Cadence from the city of Beaverton and Chris Hardy from Hillsborough. And they reviewed their projects in their jurisdictions in process as well. So I didn't want to go into all of that again, because we're working on those same 10 projects. It's just now getting them, now that they have funding, then getting them under construction. So just wanted to refresh the committee, as Vince mentioned earlier on. So we have our overall unit production goal was to produce 814 units with the funds received from the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. And so we have a pipeline of 812 units. So, and then we have about 17.4 million left to award. So we are positioned to exceed our unit production goal. So we currently have the viewfinder, which was completed in December, and then 3 projects that are under construction now. And those are highlighted in your packet in the chart there. So that is the Val Freight Avenue 26, as well as Terrace Glen, and then the conversion of the Aloha Inn Motel. And so I know a lot of you are involved in these projects in different ways, Sid and Alma and Dave and Sheila. And so that's why I really just wanted to focus my time on and highlighting the lease up process of the viewfinder, because the overall goal of the Metro Affordable Housing Bond, I mean, we have these unit production goals, but it's all about, housing low income people in our community. and as a part of that, advancing racial equity. And so it's housing people of color who are in our community. And so we've done a lot of intentional work, and really that's what Katie's work has been focused on for the past 2 years, has been connecting with community-based organizations that serve they're culturally specific. So working with the Somali Empowerment Circle, Apano, working with Vienna Star, and different groups. And so I also wanted to have, Katie to have this opportunity too, to highlight the great work that she's been doing. So it's unusual to have an AmeriCorps member for 2 years. Often it's a year of service, and they receive a very modest living stipend for their full-time work during that time. And so Katie then decided to do another year with us, and she began in March of 2020. So really right as COVID was starting. So she came into the office for her first day, and then after that went to remote work primarily. And so it's really demanded something kind of different than in the past in terms of developing those professional skills. She's had to do that remotely. And so just wanted to highlight the great work that she's done and her commitment to this project. So with that, I'm going to share Katie's presentation. And then Katie, I saw you had joined.
Yeah, I'm on the call.
Oh, great. Okay. So I will share my screen. And then you can get started. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
I'm not seeing anything.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, there we go.
All right. All right.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Shannon, for that very nice introduction. It's great to see you all virtually. So yeah, I'll just get started. So with the Viewfinder being the first Metro bond project completed in Washington County's implementation area, this was the county's first opportunity to fulfill Metro's expectation of an equitable lease-up process. So as put forth by Metro, the overall purpose of the Affordable Housing Bond Program is to provide housing for historically marginalized community members, especially low-income communities of color. Next slide. So the goal of lease-up outreach for the Viewfinder was to inform and connect with low-income communities of color. So in partnership with the housing developer for the Viewfinder, which was Community Development Partners, or CDP for short, and the property management company for the Viewfinder, which was Guardian, the two methods used to connect with community members were promotional lease-up flyers and a lease-up informational session. Next slide, please. So the lease-up flyer included a description of the project with important information such as the total number of units, the types of units, so 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, the income restrictions, the amenities offered, and details regarding how and when to sign up for the wait list. So based on Washington County's safe harbor languages and recommendations from the city of Tigard and culturally specific community-based organizations, the flyer was made available in 17 languages, which you see on the screen. The flyers were shared via email with Washington County housing groups such as the Housing and Supportive Services Network and culturally specific community-based organizations such as Adelante Mujeres. The flyers were also promoted on Washington County, the city of Tigard, and Metro's social media pages. Next slide. So as a way to conduct intentional outreach, the Department of Housing Services partnered with the Somali Empowerment Circle, or SEC for short, which is a culturally specific community-based organization that serves Somali community members in the Portland metro area, to hold a lease-up informational session for the Viewfinder via Zoom. So the initial plan was to hold several lease-up informational sessions with different BIPOC community groups, but due to the short planning timeframe and limited capacity of culturally specific community-based organizations, only one session could be coordinated. However, we also received feedback from SCC, Bienestar, and Apano on ways to make the lease-up process more accessible to communities of color, which then inform the outreach strategies used for the viewfinder lease-up. So the participants of the info session were Somali community members interested in learning about the viewfinder, and to create a safe, comfortable environment for participants, the SCC organizers facilitated the session, and all other staff were only present for the Q&A section at the end. And so the purpose of the session was to help participants understand how the viewfinder lease-up process works and what information is needed at each point in the application process. Next slide. So the first section of the session provided an overview of what affordable housing is and how the area median income statistic is used to determine a household's eligibility for affordable housing programs. The second section included pictures and a brief description of the viewfinder. So where it's located, the unit breakdown, amenities, what's nearby, so parks, grocery stores, schools, transit. And then the rest of the session outlined the process of getting on the viewfinder waitlist and next steps for applicants who are chosen to fill out the housing application. And then at the end of the session, staff from the Department of Housing Services, CDP, and Guardian helped answer participants' questions. So based on the anonymous meeting evals received and feedback from the SCC facilitators, participants felt the session was very worthwhile and helped them feel more prepared to go through the lease-up process. So 5 of the participants got on the wait list, and 2 participants recently moved into units of the viewfinder. Next slide. So one of the main hurdles encountered during the viewfinder lease-up process was a construction delay that pushed the completion date and in turn the first round of move-ins from October to December of 2021. Another element that has made this lease-up process complex is the preference policy for individuals and families at risk of homelessness, in which their applications and move-in dates are being prioritized over the general waitlist applicants. So based on feedback received from community members on the general waitlist, applicants would have benefited from more communication from the property management company regarding the delayed timeline and impact of the preference policy on timing. Next slide. So these hurdles encountered with the viewfinder lease-up have demonstrated how important it is for the property management company to consistently communicate with applicants regarding anything that would affect their application status and move-in timeline, such as construction delays and preference policies. So going through the viewfinder lease-up has provided really helpful insight into ways to further improve the lease-ups of future Metro Bond projects. Next slide. So yeah, I just included the link to the previous Metro 2020 annual report, which is very thorough, and a previous community engagement project that I worked on in 2020 was highlighted in that, if you're interested in looking at it. And then the viewfinder lease-up process will be highlighted in the 2021 annual report, which is planning on being released in May of 2022. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And I did just want to add that so Katie has also opted to extend her service for about 4 additional months to assist with the lease-up process for the Valfried Avenue to 26. And then I also want to highlight too so the annual report, the link to that Katie shared at the end for 2020. So Metro takes all of the, the progress report that was included with your packet. That progress report is submitted by all of the implementing jurisdictions around the region, and then Metro really rolls that up into that larger report that is more external facing, has more graphic design and all of that. and includes the impact of the bond overall. So in terms of sharing out to the successes of the bond throughout the region, hopefully that 2021 report, once it is completed by Metro, can be used as a good tool for that. So we're happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Any questions? Great, thank you so much, Shannon and Kim. I think she took off already, or I don't see her
Oh,
anymore.
Katie, yeah, she's on.
Katie,
It's hard to
sorry,
see
Katie.
with so many people.
Yeah. Great. So on to financial statements with Lee.
All righty, thank you. I'm going to share my screen with you now. Okay, 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So those two pages actually are part of the packet already, and I just kind of using another format, so it'll be a little bit bigger. So for the financial reports portion, I kind of separate to two parts. One is for the public housing services programs, and the other one is for Housing Authority of Washington County programs. The way information present a little different just because the different budget structure. The budget structure for the public housing services, basically, we monitor the revenue and expenditures. So the comparison for the public housing service portion is really focused on the budget dollars versus actual. So I will go through briefly for the public housing services programs, and then I'll mention about highlight few areas for housing authorities programs. So for the public housing service programs, basically there are three major programs, what I call three. One part is the continuous care grants supported by HUD fund, and one part of homeless program supported by county's general fund and public safety levy, and a small portion of homeless program is a Kaiser Metro $300 we received about 2 years ago. Then we have affordable housing bond that Shannon managed, and then we have for those two parts we separate to affordable housing admin dollars, and then we have affordable housing for project dollars. Then the next one will be the third big categories will be Metro support housing services. So for the from budget point of view, budget action point of view, we are kind of a little behind for continuous care grant. The projected dollars is we're supposed to expense about $2 million. We only expend 1.6, about $1.7 million. The reason is really because we still have some challenges for some partners that cannot really help us to not help it. It's hard to find housing units again, so it's hard to assist our clients to find units. So this is an area that we cannot really fully expense just because we also have the same issues of finding affordable housing units for our clients. The homeless programs is really focused on providing support dollars for agencies to assist, maybe do some case management, maybe do some the get fundings like Mary Mac programs or Homeless Connect programs is all housed under homeless programs. So for these programs, we are okay. It's all close to the budget actual. The difference is just because of timing. And then the Metro, Kaiser Metro 300 programs actually officially ended this by December 2020, we assist 80 households for a short term. And actually, I think we assist more than 80 households. Those households have been moved between emergency housing trust vouchers or Metro support housing services RLA programs. It depends on the qualification of different clients. So the programs ended now. Then the affordable housing programs that Metro only provide a fixed dollars for admin fee. And so far we have received a little more than what we project for. That's just because we received the lump sum in the front of the fiscal years. Then we will start to draw down based on expenditures. And then the next part is for affordable housing projects. So the budget is showing we project to receive about $15.7 million in the mid of the fiscal years. This is a presentation for information as of December 2021. Actually, we received up $24.1 million. That's just because the timing, the project timings. So once a project is approved by the Metro, by the boards, then we will receive the dollars upfront from the Metro. Then our responsibility is to disperse the payment based on the drawdown schedule for our partners. So you can see a little bit expenditure difference that so far we only dispersed about $10.1 million to the community, to the program participants right now. For Metro Supported Housing Services portion, the initial budget was projected to receive about $38 million based on initial analysis. And actually, Metro did analysis to project how much money we'll be receiving. The new projections is $50 million, but because this is income tax, so the income tax wasn't really implemented until January 2022 as a requirement. So we are still waiting for tax filers to file their tax return. So the big push will be after April 15th, when the tax return is due, then we will be able to figure out how much income tax we'll be able to collect. And Metro is responsible for actually, they partner with City of Portland to collect the income tax portion. So we will be relying on information from them to figure out how much we'll be receiving. So far, as of December 2021, we only received about $1.4 million of the $38 million. Luckily, county is able to provide an intergovernmental loan for us to provide difference until we receive more dollars from Metro. So far we expense about $2.5 million, which is a little bit less just because it takes us time to build capacities, and we're not working with many partners to fund the dollars for the case management, and also working with different agencies to assist for long-term assistance portion. So that's a little of a briefing for the public housing service portion. The next page is for Housing Authority of Washington County. So the main program is really HUD-funded programs, which will be the Section 8 and public housing. And the other portion will be for affordable housing. It's funded based on one for USDA, and the remaining portion is really funded by the revenue bonds many years ago. So for the Section 8, the projection was a little bit less than the actual is a little bit more than what we had. The reason for this one is we received COVID-19 special dollars from HUD back in 2020, and the requirement is we must expense all the dollars by December 2021. So we utilize the dollars. We received over $900,000 for admin fee. We utilize over $700,000 in current fiscal year to pay a portion of our payroll costs and other operating costs, which is the reason that we'd have additional net income left, which the money will be utilized for the future operations. And the other part I want to mention is we have more incomes than we projected, not only because the HUD CARES Act dollars, but also we were being understaffed for many years, actually for many months. This group just slowly fill positions. We had many turnovers in the past few months, and just slowly getting more staff will actually reach the reasonable staff levels. In the past, many our managers kind of work a lot overtime to fulfill the task that wasn't, we didn't have enough staff to manage. The next one is public housing. So the public housing, actually, the dollars income, net income is a little less than projected. The main reason is just because we project to have, or budget to have more capital dollars for do some rehabilitation for our properties. And just happened that it's behind the schedule. So we were not able to draw down more money to work on more of the improvement portion. And this is part, it's just because of timing. So we will try to catch up on what we need to have. And maybe the dollars will be reallocated to next fiscal year to work on some improvement. The Cape Terrace is only 14 units and is a small project. So these projects tend to be break even. So far, it's just break even point. Aloha Park, same thing, same story, is 80 units properties. And actually, Aloha Park will be part of the syndication projects. The reason for syndication is just because many of our apartments are really aged already. We expect a lot of dollars for the maintenance. It's a short-term fix, which is not a good way to keep a portfolio. So that's where we start to have a HP for syndications projects underway now. The local fund, I want to mention about local fund a little more. So local fund, the reason we have a $2.4 million of net income is because we had a big project that complete across 2 fiscal years. Landlord compensation funds. We received originally, the contract was to disperse about $28 million to the communities. At the end, actually, we started process all the award dollars and disperse the money to the community, to the landlords. When at the end, we dispersed about $30.8 million, and we received some admin fee for the portion. So basically, we assist about 47 households to pay the rent arrear, which is from April 2020 all the way to, I believe, like June 2021. So that's a portion. And the 3% of the admin fee, actually, we only utilize about $240,000. So we receive about $900,000 of admin fee, and we only utilize about $250,000. So the remaining dollars will be utilized to work for different projects. Then, so overall, we receive a little more money just because the landlord compensation fund is working pretty well. We expense less dollar. The admin cost actually is less than what we receive the awarded dollars. And then the other reason for more dollars for the local fund is the development activities kind of take off now. So we receive a little more of development fees, like for, I believe, Willow Creek Crossing, we receive a little more admin fee for that one. And we also receive some admin fee for viewfinders and other projects. And also, Guatemala Crossings, the cash disbursement is a little bit higher than what is projected. So as of now, we receive about $1.3 million. So it's average about $200,000 a month. And that will be available dollars for us to increase our affordable housing development capacities. So that's the overall presentations. Any questions for the financial statement?
Does anybody have their hand up? Because I can't see everyone's face. Can you stop sharing your screen, Ling? Thank
Certainly.
you. There we go. Any questions? Great, thank you so much. Could we move to the moving to work activities? I think that's
Yeah.
Melissa.
I'm
Okay.
going to ask Melissa to share our presentation, and we'll jump into it. So pretty excited to get going with moving to work this year. It's been a long journey, and we applied for this, like sent a letter of interest my first month here back in 2019. So the fact that we're now getting to implementation, I think shows like, it's just been a really, really long journey for us. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, like moving to work is a HUD demonstration program. It's not easy to get, although you're seeing a lot of dots here representing the MTW agencies across the country. You'll see that, that's only about 100 or so that have been awarded. So that's out of 3,300. It's really competitive. And in our cohort, many other agencies didn't get selected. But HUD demonstration program gives us an opportunity to do things that other housing authorities can't do. And we're doing that because we want to develop more affordable housing. We want to help our families reach self-sufficiency. We also think there's some really good ways to be more administratively efficient with our funding. Next slide, please. I think I did a good job hitting on that in the last slide. So we'll go ahead and move to the next one, please. So this is just a timeline of kind of where we're at on this. I'm not including like the long timeline back to 2019, but this has been a ongoing journey for all of us. And us getting approval back last year by the board to sign the moving to work contract, which was signed in November. So we now have a new ACC annual contributions contract with HUD that committed us to many of the activities that are in this plan. So that was a contractual relationship that we made when we signed the contract with HUD. So February, we're posted online for public review. We're doing our presentation today. In March, we're going to preview the MTW activities with our board of directors. We don't have work sessions, so to speak. So within the board meeting, we'll actually go over it. We're going to have community stakeholder meetings, resident participant meetings, resident advisory board meeting, and HAC recommendation. And then April, we'll go to our board of directors meeting. That's where we'll have the official public hearing, board approval. And April 15th, we have to submit the PHA plan and the MTW supplement to our friends at HUD. Next slide, please. So we have a pretty interesting slate of MTW activities. We tried really hard to, keep it manageable. I'll say when I was running the MTW program in Tacoma, we had 16 activities in our first MTW. So I think keeping it down to 7 is pretty good. You'll see here, tiered rent program is the one I mentioned. It's a mandatory by contract with our contract with HUD that we do have to implement this. And the other things are just different activities that we think are going to bring some really great simplifications and are going to help our residents, like triennial reviews. We have a local project-based voucher program, which will be great for development, not only for the housing authority, but for our nonprofit partners. Voucher set-aside programs and strategic wait lists. So let's get into it a little bit. Next slide. So as you may recall from past meetings, we need to implement something called rent reform. And rent reform, if you're familiar, the standard calculation for rent, folks pay about 30% of their income for their rent, right? There's different deductions, things of that nature, but that's been I think they call it Brooks rent. Is that the old term? I think the Brooks rent, the 30% that goes back for decades and decades. And HUD wants us to try out something for our workable population to see if we can help them increase their earned income and incentivize work. So again, this is the goal is to simplify the rent calculation and time for increased income. So the rents here, this tiered rent model, are based on a simple to read table that uses unadjusted income. There's hardship protections for large families or those with childcare expenses. Utility allowances and utility reimbursements will still be applied. Households will only have regular reviews every 3 years, and households will not have to report increases in income between regular reviews. So let me break that apart a little bit, because that's a lot of information. Right now, if you're a working family and let's say you're earning $2,000 a month, you go out, you get a raise or you get a new job, and now your income's $3,000 a month. What's the first thing you have to do? You have to come to the housing authority. You have to report your income. We readjust your rent and we increase it based on your income increase. This allows families to just keep it for 3 years. Leave them alone. and we like that. We think it's a really good idea. And the income tables here, what it allows folks to do is earn income. So when we do see them, they can earn income in a band, and their rent is just going to be simply based on this band. So if you come in at $13,000, it's going to be $321. If you're making a little bit more, if you get up close to 15,000, so it's 14,800, it's still going to be $321. So we think there's a lot of incentives baked into this program to help families earn more income and keep more income. And that's what this demonstration is about. What can we do to help our families? Next slide, please. I believe I am turning it over to Melissa to get a little bit into the weeds for us here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Josh. So we talked a little bit about this last time, but I wanted to take more time with it. When we're looking at all of these activities, there's a ton of impact analysis that goes through this. We work with an outside contractor who's able to pull apart our numbers and send me giant spreadsheets. And then we have someone inside the agency, too, an analyst inside, who gives me just so much data to manipulate and turn and look at every different way. And so it's really, really important to us that we know how each of these activities really, really will impact our households. And so again, this is the breakdown of what the tiered rent program, how the tiered rent program would impact households. And right now we have approximately 600 eligible households. And so this is based on those 600 households, but only half of them would be selected for the program. And the majority of the households will see no change or a rent decrease. And then we've got about a third of the households who would see a rent increase. And we've broken down the rent increases too, to look at we know that any sort of rent increase is an impact to a family. And so we've broken down the rent increases to look at what the impacts look like for each of the families. And for most of the families, it's a rent increase of less than $30 a month. We see a smaller number of families up above $30 a month, and the biggest rent increase from the tiered rent program right now, as we see it, would be $61. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit, I wanted to break this down a little bit. When we started doing this impact analysis, the slide you just saw wasn't how it started. There are 4 agencies who are working together on the tiered rent program. So it's us, Everett up in Washington, Akron, Ohio, and then an agency out in West Virginia. We're the 4 agencies, and we're working with HUD and MDRC, our research team, to sort of define the policies around this thing that we all agreed contractually to do. So when we first received the information about this and we started pulling impact analysis and really breaking it down, that's that top line where it says original policy. And at that point, MDRC and HUD said that rents would be based on 30% of income tiers. And we saw rent increases for 72% of our families at that point. It was just because families were still calculating rent at 30%, but they no longer had deductions. They no longer had dependent deductions or childcare deductions. Almost everyone saw their rent go up. We also saw a disparate impact on households who were mostly Black and African American or Hispanic households. And frankly, we went back to HUD and we said, we're not okay with this. We will not roll this out in our community like this. It's not something we can support. So we worked with the other 3 housing authorities and HUD and MDRC, and we dropped the rents to 28% of income tiers. And so you see right there that immediately it switches. Instead of 70% of households getting a rent increase, 70% of households see a rent decrease. So that was a really good step in the right direction. The vast majority of our households will see very little impact or a rent decrease. We still saw a disparate impact for Black, African American, and Hispanic families. And this is because those are the families who in our community have a larger family size, more dependents. And because families are losing their dependent deduction, the dependent deduction right now is $480 per dependent. And so when you have a bigger family, you lose a bigger deduction. And so our agency, and I think we're the only agency that's doing this, said to HUD and MDRC, we are going to implement our own hardship policy that's automatic for large families, where those families who have 5 or more dependents will not see more than a $30 increase in their rent because of the tiered rent program. Now, if they increase their income, they will still see an increase in rent, correlating with how that would normally go. But they're just from switching onto the tiered rent program, we're capping their rent increase at $30. And so you can see on that, in that last line, if you look in the middle line, it says the average impact for households with 5 or more dependents was almost $30 before we implemented that hardship proposal. And now the average impact for 5 or more dependents is about $13. Next slide.
So that's, I would like to actually just, I just want to take a second to recognize something. So, you know, when we talk about applying an equity lens to our work every single day, this is what we're talking about. This is HUD. This wasn't the Housing Authority coming up with this proposal. This was our friends in National HUD who proposed this. And our immediate reaction was to apply an equity lens. How is this going to impact our families? And I just want to highlight that because that is practice. That's what we should be doing to all of our policies. And when we come to this Housing Advisory Committee, we come to our board, that's what you're going to see, is that our housing department is applying an equity lens to this, always looking for disparate impact and looking for ways to mitigate it. And I will just say our staff did a really good job pushing back to HUD and MDRC explain this. And I think to their credit, we pushed them, they heard us. And so I will give them the credit, but this is how you stop bad policy from happening, right?
Thank you for that.
Alma, I saw you had 2 questions about tiered rent, so I'm just going to answer those really quickly. I don't have a slide showing income increases in relation to rent increases, but I can tell you that when I ran the numbers, it's actually folks with higher incomes who are seeing rent increases, because our folks with the lowest incomes still fall in that, still are protected kind of by the way that we calculate rent for really, really low incomes. So when I ran it, it was not highest income, but it was an average higher income for the top 5% of people seeing rent increases.
Okay.
And then if a household loses a job or has an income decrease, they can still request an interim. So they can contact us and request an interim. And I think it's considered a hardship. And so it's a 12-month approval of a rent decrease if their rent falls into a lower tier, but they can request that be renewed after 12 months. So I'm going to jump to the other activities that we're proposing that do have an impact on households, because I wanted to just talk about how we looked at those too. So within the rent simplification activity, we're doing a few different things that I think are really good moves, frankly, for the Housing Authority. I think it simplifies simplifies the calculation for our staff and for households. And I think it's really important that households actually understand how their rent is calculated. So the first one is around asset income. Right now, if you have an asset, if you have a savings account, if you have a retirement account, you are required to report that to us, and then we use it to calculate it as part of your income. So of the 2,256 households that we currently have reporting assets, the average impact is $3 per household per year. We're talking households who have like $6 in a savings account, and they're required to bring in paperwork to show us that they have $6 in their savings account, and then we're using to calculate their income, and it's just administratively burdensome. So we are proposing that we will disregard all assets when a total household asset is less than $100,000. And this is a way that we can still make sure that households with those really, really high assets are using a portion of that income to pay their rent, but it's disregarding the vast majority of households, 99% of household assets, because most of those are under $100,000. And so at the bottom there, you see that the households who've been reporting assets, those with less than $100,000 in assets, they'll all see a rent decrease, except most of them see no change at all because they had so little assets, but we were still doing all this work to calculate them. So only 4 households will see more than a $10 rent decrease. Next slide. The next one is the medical and disability expense deduction. Right now, medical and disability expenses are complicated. Every household has a threshold that you have to get above before we count your medical or disability expense to deduct it from your income. The threshold for every household is calculated separately. So we're doing away with the threshold, and we're using this simplified table. And this is just a glance of the table. The table goes higher if it needs to. But really what the table is we take your actual medical expenses that you report and we round it down to the nearest thousand. And that's how much we deduct from your annual income. If you have less than $5,000 in medical expenses, we allow you to self-certify. You don't need to bring in every receipt and all that stuff. We'll have a form that you fill out that says, this is how much my medical expenses are. If you have less than $1,500 in medical expenses, at this point, we're not going to include that as a deduction. And the reason for that $1,500 cutoff is because the households with that range of medical deductions, we're really seeing about like a $5 or $6 difference in rent. But right at $1,500, we had a bunch of households who were in that $1,700 range. I think it's, what's the word I'm looking for? And now I've got deductions stuck in my head, but it's Medicare and Medicaid related copays. And so we're gonna do $1,500 and above. If you have less than $1,500 in medical expenses, we're not even gonna bother. And then we're only going to collect this information once every 12 months. So no more households coming in every month and saying, oh, hey, here's my receipt from my last doctor's appointment, adjust my income. It will just be a once a year, you report your medical expenses, and then we move forward. So the table at the bottom shows the households with reported medical disability expenses right now. We do see some households with a rent increase. Most of those households are looking at a rent increase between $1 and $10. But because these households very frequently have their rent calculated on different medical expenses every year, they're kind of used to these small changes. The largest rent increase is $28 and the largest decrease is $44. And that's just because of where households fall in that $1,000 deduction and what their current threshold is. Next slide. I see a question.
I just want to make sure.
Yep, I saw a question in the chat about including vet expenses for support animals. I'm not sure. That would be an ACOP admin plan. That would be a policy question that I'm not familiar with, but I'll chase it down and see what I can find out.
I have a question on the previous slide. Melissa, can you talk a little bit about how the history of increases has occurred for some of these tenants? Is this the first time they're ever seeing one, or is this an annual affair and it may not impact them, but this might?
The increases will happen at their annual review. And so so households are mostly accustomed, I shouldn't speak so broadly, every household is different, but a lot of households are very accustomed to coming in, reporting their income. They've had an increase in income, especially if they're on a fixed income and there's been an increase in COLA or something like that. They're very accustomed to seeing rent changes year to year. So this is something that this will be a process that they go through with their occupancy specialist, just like normal. And before the household comes in, we will also be sending lots of communications out to let households know that we're making these changes in how we calculate these different things. But we'll really work hard to help households understand also why we're changing these things too. Okay, next slide. So this one is the proration for mixed eligibility households. So we have 46 mixed eligibility households. A mixed eligibility household is a household in which one or more members of the household are ineligible citizens. So folks not eligible for citizenship. Of the 46 households, I believe we have 6 who have 2 members not eligible for citizenship. The rest of them all have 1 member not eligible for citizenship. So currently this assistance is prorated based on how many family members are on your household, how many of those family members are an ineligible citizen, and the amount of assistance you're receiving. So it's super complicated. It seems basic, but when we started pulling apart the numbers, we realized that this was just really, really intricate. And the way that it affected families was kind of surprising. Families saw an impact between $5 or $6 up to hundreds of dollars a month in their rent their assistance being decreased. And so we are proposing a standard subsidy deduction of $100 to any mixed eligibility household, regardless of family size, regardless of how many members in the family are not eligible citizens, and regardless of their assistance levels. And the bottom there shows you the impact to the households. We have 5 households who will see a rent increase. And those are households who currently, because they're receiving such a small amount of rent assistance from the housing authority, their impact from the current proration schedule was very, very small. The proration schedule is just super, super complicated, and it's kind of a crazy thing to dig into, but the vast majority of our households will see a rent decrease, including households who will see a monthly rent decrease of more than $400 or $500. Any questions on that one? Yeah, Alma.
When you say the largest decrease in monthly rent is $887, so someone was paying $887 more than what they should have been, or that was under the 30% threshold, but under this move to work, it's been determined they're paying $887 more.
That's correct. So
can you
when we modeled this and calculated families' rents based on the standard calculation with no proration, and then compared it to what they're currently paying, we saw households paying up to $887 more than they would be paying if we calculated their rents using the standard calculation.
And can I just insert in here, like, this is a separate activity from rent reform. This is us looking at the HUD regulations around if you're a mixed status family. So you have ineligible and eligible citizens. That's what you have to do. All the housing authorities across the country have to calculate rent a certain way. And now we have this MTW authority, and we're coming in and saying, we think there's a better way to do this. And we think it'll be more equitable for the families who are going through this. So it's kind of like separate from the rent reform. It's us coming in and really looking at a policy that we just fundamentally have some issues with. I see Melinda also has a question.
Hi, yes. So I'm currently on you guys' I think public housing. So I pay $1,600 rent right now. So are you saying that when this goes into effect, it would be $800 something more?
No, this one is only for households who have mixed eligibility. So if they have a member in their household who's a non-citizen, and that $887 is just one of those households. There's a range of increase and decreases for those 46 households. And that $800 is actually a decrease for that family. That family is currently paying more, but this activity only affects 46 households. So it's a relatively small number of our households, between 10 and 20% of our households. And the number of families who are seeing that really, really big decrease is also really small, only 3 families with more than $400 in a rent decrease. But it's go ahead.
Is that program only for immigrants?
So right now we are mandated by HUD to calculate rent for, it's not necessarily immigrants, it's families where someone doesn't have eligibility status. They can't be an eligible citizen for a variety of reasons. But right now, the mandated way that we calculate the rent is resulting in these really, really big rent increases for these families. So we are using our MTW flexibility to change that so that we don't have to go with the standard way that HUD tells us to calculate these rents, and their rents will be calculated closer to the normal way that rents are calculated for households where everyone's an eligible citizen. And then we will deduct $100 in their assistance from that rent. Does that make more sense? Or is it still confusing?
Yeah, I guess it does. It's not going to apply to it. So this program wouldn't apply to me, I guess is what I'm asking.
It only applies to households where someone in the household is not an eligible citizen.
Yeah, and I would always recommend if there's a specific level question to reach out to staff and they can go over it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions about that one? That one is a big kind of complicated one. I'm scrolling, I don't see other hands up. So next slide.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the last activity I wanted to really talk about was, this is sort of a simpler one. It's triennial reviews for seniors and people with disabilities. And this is just recognizing that those households typically do not see big changes in their income from year to year. A lot of those, actually all of the households who will qualify for this have a fixed income source. So our requirements for this are that all adults in the household are seniors or people with disabilities. So if you have someone who's, if you have maybe someone has a child in their household who's 24, then that household wouldn't qualify. And then the household has to have at least one fixed income source. And the idea is that these households' incomes don't change very much from year to year, and having them come in every year to report their income changes and have their rent recalculated is complicated and time consuming. We will still do annual check-ins, kind of automated check-ins with these households so that they can report their medical expenses, so that we can adjust any COLA adjustments, any utility allowance adjustments, any payment standard adjustments. So we'll still do once a year kind of quick check-in automated sort of thing with households, but otherwise they don't have to do the full review every year, just once every 3 years. And we estimate that 1,300 households will qualify for this. So that means it's like 700 less reviews per year, something like that. So big staff savings with this one. Next slide. Josh, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I just got 2 more slides. I'm gonna wrap up real quick. These are a slate of activities. We're gonna simplify some stuff around inspections. We're gonna create some more flexibilities around project-based vouchers. We're capped at how many vouchers we can project-based right now. With MTW, we're gonna increase that, so that allows the project-based more of our vouchers out in the community, which I think is a good thing. I think we can all agree about that. And then we're also looking at a partnership with the Beaverton School District. They have one of the highest homeless rates for kids in the state, if not the highest. And so we're looking at a partnership with them, a pilot where we're gonna basically set aside 50 vouchers for homeless kids at the Beaverton School District. So we're partnering with them to get 50 families kind of housed, provide case management and stabilization to see if we can't help stabilize and create kind of a catalytic partnership there. So there will be more to come on that. But those are just some other highlights I wanted to give you around these programs. Next slide, please. Next steps, again, we're going to collect public comment through the next month. Stakeholder and resident meetings are coming up. We'll come back to the resident advisory boards and our housing advisory committee meetings in March, and then April we're going to move forward with this at the board meeting. So I will end it there because I want to make sure we have time for other parts of the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Melinda, did you have another question? I see your hand up still. No. Okay, Catherine.
I want to say, wow, that's a pretty amazing and in-depth analysis that you guys did to make sure to manage and mitigate any disparate impact. And it looks like, based on what I'm seeing, that the vast majority of households will actually see a reduction in their overall rent, which is awesome and amazing. And congratulations on that as well. My kind of question about that is, I think early on in the conversations, we were kind of, I believe I'm remembering that there was kind of an understanding or a comment or a thought that doing this would actually increase revenue into the program. And so I'm just kind of curious how, if the vast majority of the rents are going down, what does it mean for like revenue stabilization for the department? And is that a concern, or am I misremembering stuff?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? I'm having some technical difficulty. You can- Okay. So I think like our affordable portfolio is kind of separate from this, right? So this is just our federal housing programs, public housing, housing choice voucher. We are not going to have any savings. If anything, we're actually going to spend a little bit more than we would have. But I think that is okay. And the reason I would say that's okay is because we're looking at other opportunities, like on the administrative side, to make savings. We're looking at other opportunities to bring more revenues into the housing authority. You know, we were talking a couple years ago. You're right, Catherine. You're absolutely right. A couple years ago, we were talking about partnering this with tightening up of our subsidy standards, where we were talking about doing 2 people per room to like save money. And we decoupled that when COVID hit. It just wasn't, we couldn't do that, right? I mean, in the middle of a pandemic. So I think like the fact that we decoupled that and the fact that we're also just not willing to have any disparate impact, it puts us at a point where it might be an extra 40,000 or so a year that we're going to put out. It's somewhat negligible. So I don't see us saving money on this, but I do think that with some of the special programs that we're going to be operating and some of the administrative savings, that could present us more opportunity to serve more families in different types of ways coming up.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, if I remember correctly, that was the other kind of consideration, is serving more families. So serving more families with lower rents, and that's pretty remarkable that you found a way to make that pencil out. So good work.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. There is a lot of really great information in the packet under the additional department updates. We don't have time to go over it. We had indicated in previous meetings that we would only do 2 to 3 real thorough updates to you all. So that is for your reading pleasure in your evening hours, if you like. But what I did want to spend the last 10 minutes of our meeting is asking you all if you have additional topics that you would like to bring have brought to this these committee meetings. You know, we talked about homeownership, we talked about immigrant refugee services support. Are there others that you would like to have, you know, staff or ourselves bring to this committee to drill down a little bit more? Come on. Sheila?
Well, I guess just, I really appreciated the bond discussion, and I know the report has a ton of detail, so I look forward to reading that, maybe not even at night. But the question that is, you know, the curiosity for me is how much all this work is going to result in real differences in demographics leasing up. So I would love to hear kind of as and I know this is early times, so as the projects start leasing up, so maybe some months in the future, like just to hear, is there a significant difference in the demographics, especially racial, of folks leasing up? Did all that extra outreach and maybe, you know, changes in screening, what was the result?
You can do that.
Excellent. I see Balen's hand is up.
Yeah, Alma, can I share my screen? It's gonna be for 5 minutes.
I don't have that authority. Jacob, are you able to allow a panelist to share their screen?
I believe Belen should be able to share his screen.
Yes, I can. I was asking for permission.
Oh, please.
Can you see my screen now?
with Elon Musk? Yes.
Yeah. Look, this is the idea of a tiny smart house that costs only 50K. I like this idea.
You mean Elon Musk is investing in tiny houses, or what? I'm not sure what the video is representing.
So this video is about that Elon Musk is just moving, selling all the houses and moving to a small, tiny one that costs only like a 5,000.
So you want to have a discussion around tiny houses and
yeah,
maybe
smart
ADUs?
tiny
Okay.
house, and it looks like a solution for manual. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else? Maybe we could stop sharing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stop it.
I think maybe at the top. Yeah, there we go. I've got tiny houses and
Did I stop it?
Yes.
Okay.
3D printed homes. Awesome. Yes.
Alma, this is Eric Schmidt. Could I talk to Acting Executive Director Joshua for just a second about his public affairs campaign that he mentioned right off the top of the bat of the meeting today? What is it that we
Still
can
just
do
a
to help-
deputy. I'm not acting anything. Combs still in charge.
Okay, deputy. What can we do to help? And also, you know, I do have that little program at TVC TV. I'd be more than happy to give you some airtime. Just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just pushing the information out in your networks is really, really important. There's a lot of disinformation out there right now, and there's a lot of movements. I mean, it's really hitting the Portland metro area, but it's out here too. When I go out in the public, people are what Sheila said at the beginning, like people are they don't have all the information. It's not getting out there now. So everything that you can do to push the information out there that you're hearing in these meetings about the development that's taking place, the folks that we're housing with our SHS programs, the new initiatives that we're doing, you know, with our federal programs. I think getting that information out there as far and wide as possible is really, really important. I can also ask our public affairs folks, if you're not signed up for our newsletters, we should get you into that so you can see all the information that we're getting out there at a public affairs level. So we'd be happy to do that. And yeah, I think if there's any types of media opportunities, our public affairs staff would be interested in hearing about that.
Okay, well, I'll go offline with you on that, and maybe you can give me some bullet points and some contacts, and I'll do what I can do.
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks.
So Dave asked, put in additional detail in the chat, if we can capture that in terms of conversations around demographics, once we've had bond projects, you know, more of them to talk about. Unless, Sheila, you're also, I guess you are talking about just those, correct? The bond projects, or are we interested?
I mean, it just
in-
seems like that's something that's being analyzed. I'm not sure. I mean, we see the demographics on the Section 8 wait lists to some extent in the reports.
Yeah. Do we see it for all of the lease up activities of HAC or Housing Authority properties? Do we get that in our reports?
I can't remember what's.
I think we can get more information on that, especially as we're going through these like redevelopment cycles. The bond properties are really interesting. Just shortly, like people just had to income qualify when they got into the properties, like at 60–80%. And so up until this point, going through syndication of the properties, no one had to come in and do anything. So some people haven't had touch points for like 10–15 years, right? So I think we're just starting now to get better information as we're going through syndication and have to do income qualification. So.
Personally, I'd love to hear more about partnerships that maybe our bond projects have in place and how that's going, whether they are meeting the objectives of the NOFA and the bond in terms of equity and inclusion, and creating a difference in terms of building the capacity of those organizations alongside, not just sort of check the box token effort, but how that's going and whether they are meaningful.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know Shannon's on here, so I think maybe we can plan for that, Shannon, a little bit more of a deep dive, and then next time you come around for the highlight presentation.
Yeah. So if no one else has any other ideas, oh, Sid, there we go.
I just wanted to, I don't know if this has been mentioned before, but I would be interested in what's happening in terms of the combining or integrating wraparound services with affordable housing.
Yeah. I think that that would be a good next time we come around on the homeless services, because there's been a lot of integration between like Metro Bond, real estate development, and supportive services. And the fact that we, if you go to Portland, you have Home Forward, you have the Portland Housing Bureau, you have the joint office. In many ways, we have a lot of that all packed under one house. So I think we're doing some really great synergetic work because we're all in house, so we can layer and do all these really amazing things. So I think that's a good point, Sid. And I think next time we bring the homeless topics up, we can maybe do a deeper dive on that as well.
Thanks, Josh.
This has been great. If there isn't anything else, I move to adjourn.
Second. You did a great job, Josh. Keep it up.
I just want to say Josh also contributed to my vocabulary today. I haven't heard synergetic as a word. Synergy a lot, but that's cool. I had to look it up. It is a word, so good.
It is legit. Okay. Because I loved it.
Too bad it's not 5 letters for the Wordle of the day, right? So, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Meeting end time at 10:57 a.m.